Hello, it's Amy Rofale for the Jerusalem Connection Report, Friday Red Alert, November 27th. Happy Thanksgiving! To continue our analysis of recent events worldwide, I wanted to talk about some of the reactions I have observed. Just a few days after November 13th, while I was watching the news with my 17-year-old daughter, we were watching vigils and people commenting on the acts of terror and being outraged at these events. She saw compassion, she saw demonstrative outrage about the injustice and frustration. And she agreed with it. But then she asked me, as good as these reactions are and how important they are, why don't people react the same way when things like this happen in Israel, which actually occurs far more often? She continued that she wanted the world to be outraged, and she thought it was a good thing that they were outraged and reacting to the Parisians with sympathy and solidarity. She wanted that same amount of vigor for the Israelis. It's not that she wanted to bring down the reaction for the Parisians. Instead, she wanted to bring up the compassion for the Israelis when they endure similar events on their very streets. That very night, on another TV news program, a commentator had mentioned that 2 days before the attacks in Paris, 89 people were killed in a terrorist attack in Beirut, Lebanon. The commentator went on to say how curious it was that the Western media coverage of that was limited and there was practically no public outcry or response to it. So the question is, why these different reactions? Why is it when Europeans or Americans are attacked, there is a right and good, proper response demonstrated? But when the same kind of events happen in the Middle East, in Israel, or among other peoples, the proper and good response seems to be missing. I would argue that some of it is anti-Semitism, and some of it is just apathy. We don't seem to sympathize with people we don't relate to. The people of Beirut, Christians, Yazidis, and Muslim peoples in Iraq and Syria, who are systematically slaughtered and terrorized by ISIS because either their identity, or even if they're Muslim, their inability to agree with the terrorists' ideal. The people in Israel enduring daily hatred by their very neighbors, Palestinians, who are being encouraged by their corrupt leadership to go out. They're encouraging their children to hurt Jewish people indiscriminately, regardless of age or situation. These events are going on with what seems to be little condemnation by the West, or little outrage. There's lip service to it, but particularly with the Obama administration, there's no anger, there's no outrage about what all these peoples are suffering in the Middle East. The Christians, the Yazidis, the other Muslims who are killed by the ISIS, let alone the Israelis. He didn't even have that much of a response for the Parisians, calling it a setback, where Hollande called it an act of war. When we discuss the issues of BDS here at the Jerusalem Connection, we talk about anti-Semitism on college campus, in political circles, in academic policies, and economic policies, particularly in Europe. We also talk about anti-Semitism among pop culture. It is the same off-kilter moral backwardness where liberals who claim to be for freedom of expression, seeking truth, and human rights protections fall short. And they fall short because they apply their ideals selectively and with no logic, often demonizing the very groups of people that are trying to help oppressed folks, the very group of people that can offer the avenue out of oppression, particularly the Israelis in the Middle East. Sometimes Christian groups around the world. They're demonized for somehow being the bad guy. Yet the inability to properly recognize what causes these problems and then identify who causes them are then not properly addressed. And the very people that they claim to help are actually continued to be hurt. This is demonstrated all the time in the academic community and political communities when it comes to anti-Semitic responses to Israeli actions. Even Palestinians themselves have claimed that they would rather live under Israeli rule than any place else. There is justice, there is laws, there's enforcement of laws. So the devil seems to connect all his assets. It's our job to connect all the dots so we can prayerfully and willfully respond to these actions all over the world. Until next week, Shabbat Tov. Have a good week. Shabbat Shalom.